October 1974. A devoted mother of 3 waves goodbye to her kids after dinner, kisses her husband, and drives off in her Cortina for a quick £100 modeling gig. A simple phone call from a charming stranger called Peter, a broken down car, a tense roadside argument, then nothing. 3 days later, her body lies face down in a freezing pond 40 miles away, wrists bound, strangled, her watch stopped, dead at 8:10. For over 50 years, her killer has walked free. Who was Peter, and how many more did he lure before vanishing into the Essex shadows? Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Josephine Mary Backshall came into this world in 1935 and was living on Norfolk Close in Maldon, Essex, in a semi-detached home with her family. She shared her home with husband Clifford, who worked as a rally mechanic for Ford. They had 3 children: Christopher, aged 12, Sarah, aged 10, and Emma, aged 7. Josephine was widely regarded as an energetic and sociable woman. She stood approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall, had straight brown hair, and maintained a slender, fit build. Colleagues, friends, and neighbors consistently described her as warm, affectionate, and emotionally supportive. Professionally, Josephine worked as a clerk for a timber merchant in Maldon. Her role involved administrative duties, record keeping, and typing, drawing on her earlier experience in banking. She was considered reliable and conscientious, rarely absent from work, and attentive to detail. Outside of her employment, she devoted substantial time to voluntary and religious activities. She was a committed member of the Maldon Catholic Choir and regularly attended rehearsals and services. She also volunteered with the church's Girl Guides and Brownies groups, helping to organize activities and mentor younger girls. These commitments placed her firmly within the social fabric of the local community. In addition to her religious and voluntary work, Josephine maintained an active social life through dancing. She was a member of the Scottish Caledonian Society in Witham, where she regularly participated in Scottish country dancing. By early 1974, changes in Josephine's domestic life had begun to influence her outlook. As her children grew older and became more independent, the demands of full-time motherhood lessened. Household routines that had once filled her days now required less time and attention. According to friends, she began expressing a desire to expand her activities beyond her existing roles. She was not unhappy in her marriage or dissatisfied with her family life, but she appeared increasingly interested in new experiences, personal development, and additional income. That February, Josephine took a practical step toward these goals by placing a classified advertisement in the Maldon and Burnham Standard newspaper. The advertisement read, "Lady, late 30s, seeks part-time employment. Own transport, anything considered. Previous experience banking, able to type." The wording was deliberately broad and made no reference to specific industries. By stating that anything would be considered, Josephine presented herself as flexible and open to opportunity. Investigators later noted that this openness, combined with her willingness to trust strangers, may have exposed her to individuals with dishonest intentions. Shortly after the advertisement appeared, Josephine was contacted by a man named Peter, who claimed to work in advertising and modeling. He presented himself as being involved in commercial photography and promotional work and suggested that Josephine would be suitable for modeling assignments. He arranged an initial meeting with her in Witham, but failed to attend. He later contacted her to apologize and offered explanations that were vague but apparently convincing. A second meeting was arranged, and once again he did not appear. After further apologies, a third meeting was scheduled, which did take place in Witham. Despite the repeated failures, Josephine continued communication with him, indicating either that she accepted his explanations or that she was reluctant to abandon what appeared to be a legitimate opportunity. In March 1974, neighbors observed Josephine modeling in her back garden while a man took photographs of her. The man is described to be approximately 40 years old, between 5'9" and 5'11" tall, with a receding hairline. He was using a 35mm camera and appeared familiar with photographic equipment. The session was sufficiently noticeable to attract attention but did not appear suspicious at the time. Despite later extensive inquiries, this man was never identified, and police would eventually conclude that he was almost certainly the individual responsible for Josephine's murder. Following the garden photo session, there is little evidence of sustained professional modeling work arising from this contact. On the 29th of October 1974, this contact resumed with renewed urgency. At approximately 1 p.m., Josephine received another telephone call from a public payphone kiosk. The caller again identified himself as Peter and claimed that a model scheduled for a photography session in Cheltenham had become ill. He stated that he urgently needed a replacement and offered Josephine £100 for the assignment, a sum that represented a substantial financial incentive in 1974. The session, he said, was scheduled for 6:30 p.m. that evening. Josephine agreed to meet the caller at Witham railway station, approximately 7 miles from her home. She appears to have regarded it as a genuine professional opportunity. That evening, life in the Backshall household followed its usual routine. Josephine prepared dinner for her children, and the family ate together. At approximately 6:15 p.m., husband Clifford returns home from work. Josephine kissed him and their children goodbye, telling them she would return later, and left the house in the family's red Ford Cortina. She then drove towards Witham to meet the man who had contacted her earlier that day. This was the last confirmed occasion on which she was seen by members of her family. At approximately 7:15 p.m., Josephine's Ford Cortina was observed parked on Collingwood Road in Witham. The vehicle's bonnet was raised, indicating a potential mechanical problem. A woman matching Josephine's age, height, build, and clothing description was seen standing beside the car with a man. Several members of the public who passed along Collingwood Road had stopped to offer assistance, but the woman declined all offers of help. She consistently told them that someone was already on their way to assist her. Although she appeared unsettled and agitated, she did not exhibit signs of panic or extreme distress. Investigators would later question whether she was attempting to avoid involving strangers or whether she had been instructed to do so by the man. One of the most significant witnesses of this incident came from a Mr. Robertson, a 42-year-old employee working at the nearby Witham railway station car park. Mr. Robertson reported seeing the woman engaged in conversation and at times what appeared to be an argument with a man. The man was described as being approximately 30 years old, around 6 feet tall, with short brown hair and wearing a check-patterned sports jacket. According to Mr. Robertson, the man placed his arm around the woman, yet she appeared uncomfortable with his contact. He stated that she seemed reluctant to move close to him and that her body language suggested unease rather than familiarity. Mr. Robertson later told police that the woman looked as if she didn't want to get too close to him, although he had his arm around her. Police would later confirm that the Ford Cortina would be moved from this location on Collingwood Road by 9 p.m. that evening. At approximately 10:30 p.m., a further potential sighting is reported. Josephine was said to have been seen in the company of an unidentified man at the Fountain Pub in Good Easter, Essex, a village situated roughly between Witham and Maldon. There was also mention of a dark Ford Cortina as potentially being linked to the couple in the car park. The landlady of the Fountain Pub would later recall that the couple had stopped for drinks. She described the man as exceptionally tall, so tall that his head brushed or touched the beer mats hanging above the bar. She stated that she did not obtain a clear view of his face and believed that he had deliberately avoided close scrutiny, possibly by keeping his head down or turning away from staff and patrons. By midnight, Josephine had not returned home and made no contact with her family. Her husband, Clifford Backshall, increasingly concerned, then reports his wife missing to police. On the following morning of October 30th, Josephine's red Ford Cortina is formally recovered from the Collingwood Road car park, adjacent to where it had been seen the night before. The radio had been forcibly removed, indicating a potential break-in, but there were no signs of a struggle inside the vehicle itself. No indicators of violence were detected. It is unclear whether the theft of the car radio is related to Josephine's murder. Then, on the 1st of November, at approximately 11:45 a.m., horrifying news emerged. Local post office engineering workers were repairing underground cables along Bury Green Lane in Little Haddam, Hertfordshire. While working in a secluded Lover's Lane area, they noticed a body laying face down in a shallow pond containing approximately 12 inches of water. They immediately alerted authorities. The body was identified as Josephine Backshall's. The location was remote and rarely used by the general public, suggesting that the individual responsible possessed detailed local knowledge of the Hertfordshire-Essex border region. Police quickly secured the scene and forensic personnel were deployed. Pathologist Dr. John Haas attended shortly thereafter to conduct a preliminary examination. Josephine was found fully clothed. There was no evidence of assault. Her wrists had been bound together in front of her body using cord, and additional cord was present wrapped around her neck. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation. Her gloves and handbag were placed neatly beside her body, a detail that investigators found particularly unsettling, as it suggested deliberate placement rather than random disposal. It also ruled out any motive for robbery. Her wristwatch had eerily stopped at 8:10, although the precise cause of the malfunction was never conclusively determined. Whether the stoppage resulted from water exposure, physical damage, or mechanical failure remained unclear. Based on the condition of the body, transport patterns, and geographic considerations, investigators concluded that Josephine had most likely been killed and driven approximately 40 miles to the deposition site. Hertfordshire and Essex police immediately launched a major investigation. Detectives conducted house-to-house inquiries in Maldon, Witham, and surrounding villages, canvassing residents for sightings, statements, and information about any suspicious activity on the 29th of October. Roadblocks were established along key routes between Maldon, Witham, and Little Haddam, and police systemically checked local garages, mechanics, and motoring establishments for records or eyewitness accounts of motorists assisting a red Ford Cortina on the roadway. Incident rooms were established in both Bishop Stortford and Maldon, staffed by approximately 50 dedicated officers. The investigation's weekly expenditure reached £3,000 a week, a substantial sum in 1974. Police issued a public appeal for information. They sought any women who may have been approached in the preceding months by a man offering advertising or modeling work similar to the opportunities presented to Josephine. Dozens of women responded, recounting encounters that were remarkably consistent in method. In March 1975, a breakthrough arose when police traveled to Paris to interview a French traveling salesman. This followed the discovery of a bottle of Jean Gatineau skin lotion on Josephine's dressing table, labeled "not for sale" and never officially having been imported into Britain. Investigators theorized that the lotion may have been supplied by the French salesman to the killer who was posing as a cosmetics advertiser. The French individual was ultimately ruled out by detectives because he was not present in England at the time of the murder. He also stated that he could not recall to whom he had distributed these samples. During this same period, detectives revealed to the public that at least 3 other women in Essex had been contacted in the same manner prior to Josephine's death. Each described a man who was confident, cultured, and seemingly around 40 years old. His tone was described as cool and crisp, businesslike, which, despite its polished nature, made the women uneasy and prevented them from attending any potential meetings. He referred to himself as either Peter or Dave and consistently called from public telephone kiosks, particularly in Great Topham, Essex. One of the 3 women reported that he claimed to be relocating his office to Bishop Stortford, a pattern consistent with the telephone calls and Josephine's body recovery. By March of 1975, police began interviewing large numbers of local men to identify potential suspects. Records indicate that more than 4,000 men from the Colchester, Chelmsford and Bishop Stortford areas were questioned, with particular attention given to those men named Peter or Dave. On the 2nd of November, investigators released the Photofit image of a suspect. This was developed from descriptions provided by a female friend of Josephine who had visited her home on the day she had been photographed in March 1974 in her back garden. This was a surprise visit, and something about this man had stuck with the friend. This photofit was circulated through national and local media with the caption, "Have you ever seen a man like this anywhere at any time?" But ultimately, nobody would recognize this man. Throughout late 1975, further leads emerged, yet consistently resulted in dead ends. 3 additional women had come forward to police, reporting similar approaches from a smooth-talking photographer offering modeling opportunities. Each had agreed to a meeting, but the man mysteriously never appeared. In all 3 cases, though, the women had attended with their husbands who kept close observations. Potentially, this deterred the man from revealing himself. In a separate incident, public reports described a woman resembling Josephine being photographed near a scenic waterfall outside Maldon prior to her murder, with the man in question described as well-built, in his 30s and approximately 6 feet tall. But again, despite these numerous reports, no arrest was made, and police were unable to establish any definitive links between the suspect and the murder scene. By April of 1976, further indications suggested that the perpetrator remained active. A dancer who had recently won a Carnival Queen contest received a call offering modeling work that police believed was connected to Josephine's killer. This reinforced the theory that the offender had a consistent modus operandi and may have been actively seeking victims for an extended period. Police settled on 2 hypotheses regarding the murder. Theory 1 considered the possibility of a legitimate modeling assignment gone wrong, in which a professional photographer became violent, perhaps his advances being spurned by Josephine. The second theory poses the potential likelihood that the classified advertisement itself served purely as a lure, with the perpetrator deliberately targeting women who responded. Investigators were unable to positively identify the individual or gather sufficient evidence to link any particular person to the murder. And by 1979, the investigation into the murder of Josephine Mary Backshall had effectively reached an impasse. By this point, more than 5,000 men had been interviewed in connection with the case. During the intervening decades, private family efforts maintained public attention on the case. Josephine's 3 children, now adults, continued to advocate for her renewed scrutiny and for the identification of their mother's killer. With the advent of advances in forensic science, particularly the potential for DNA analysis on preserved evidence such as the clothing and cord bindings and the wristwatch, the case became a candidate for formal cold case re-examination. On the 2nd of November 2009, Hertfordshire police launched a high-profile public appeal to coincide with the 35th anniversary of Josephine's murder. Josephine's 3 children participated in the press conference, describing their mother's character, her community involvement, and the profound impact her loss had had on their lives. The following year, a major development occurred. On the 3rd of March 2010, Hertfordshire police announced the arrest of a 68-year-old man from the Maldon area of Essex. Based on physical description and circumstantial evidence, he was considered to have been in his early to mid-30s in 1974, aligning with the profile of the man known to Josephine as Peter. The suspect was taken into custody and questioned extensively by detectives from the Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire Cold Case Review Unit. He is then subsequently released on bail pending further inquiries, initially scheduled for April 2010. The bail was later extended as ongoing investigative checks continued, but ultimately the suspect would be released without charge, as authorities determined there was insufficient evidence to support a charge. The release of this suspect represented a devastating blow to the Backshall family. Decades of waiting for justice, renewed hope and intense emotional investment in the investigation were met with the reality that the identity of Josephine's killer remained unknown. and as of the airing of this documentary, the case remains officially unsolved. The man identified as Peter has never been traced, and no subsequent suspect has been publicly linked to the murder. Josephine Mary Backshall was more than the victim of a tragic crime. She was the devoted mother, a loving wife, a committed volunteer, and a vibrant member of her community. Her warmth, energy, and generosity touched all who knew her, and her loss left an enduring void in the lives of her children and neighbors. While the passage of time has not brought answers, her memory endures as a reminder of the human life behind the investigation, a life of care, devotion, and quiet courage that deserves to be remembered with dignity and respect. Thank you for watching and listening to Josephine's story. Please feel free to add your own thoughts, comments, and theories down below, and we'll see you next time.